Kane stepped off his small transport ship, his boots crunching against the jagged red rocks of the Death World. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of unknown plants and the faint metallic tang of the soil. Alien observers watched from a distance, hidden behind hovering observation platforms. The Galactic Council had deemed this planet impossible to survive. It was a place where the apex predators ruled, where no intelligent being had lasted more than a few days. Yet, Kane walked forward calmly as if he had come to a park for a stroll. In his hand he carried a small crate. From the way he held it, it seemed ordinary, nothing special. The aliens snickered among themselves. What kind of human would bring a box to a death world? One whispered, barely hiding his amusement. They expected the human to fail quickly. They had watched many species try and die here, but Kane looked different. He looked fearless. He stopped in a clearing, scanning the twisted forest around him. The trees were thick, with vines that moved slightly as if alive. Strange sounds echoed from every direction. Low growls, high-pitched screeches, the rustle of movement too quick for the eye to catch. Kane set down the crate and opened it slowly. A small creature peeked out. It had dark fur, sharp little claws, and bright, clever eyes. It was a honey badger. The aliens laughed openly now. A honey badger? One said. This tiny thing will not even last an hour here. Kane simply smiled. He knelt and let the honey badger stretch and sniff the air. The badger looked at Kane, then at the forest, and hissed softly. It was ready. Kane stood and gestured for the creature to follow him. It obeyed instantly, darting into the shadows with speed and confidence. Kane followed without fear, his calm presence strangely reassuring to the alien observers. They had never seen a human act like this. Most beings trembled on this planet, but not Kane. As they moved deeper into the jungle, the sounds of the wild grew louder. Branches snapped, and leaves rustled as massive creatures watched from the darkness. Kane paused, listening. He whispered something to the honey badger, and it crouched low, eyes glinting with intelligence. Then a shadow moved above them. A giant bird-like predator, wings spanning more than Kane's height, swooped down. The honey badger leapt forward, snarling, and Kane moved just enough to stay behind it, guiding it with soft commands. The predator shrieked and veered away, confused by the tiny, fearless creature that dared to attack. Kane walked on, unshaken, and the aliens blinked in disbelief. Nothing on this planet was supposed to fear anything small, yet the predator had retreated. Hours passed. Kane and the honey badger crossed rivers filled with sharp-toothed fish and climbed cliffs where giant insects clung to the rocks like living armor. Every step seemed more dangerous than the last, yet Kane moved steadily, calculating each risk. The honey badger was always at his side, fearless, clever, and fast. It scouted ahead, protected him when necessary, and never panicked. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the land. Kane finally stopped at the edge of a cliff overlooking a massive valley. Below, the territory of the apex predators stretched as far as the eye could see. Towers of bone and the remains of huge creatures littered the landscape. Alien observers held their breath. They expected Kane to hesitate or flee, but he knelt calmly on the cliff edge, watching the valley. The honey badger sat on his shoulder, alert but relaxed. Kane looked up at the sky and whispered, "This is where we begin." The alien scientists whispered among themselves. They had underestimated humans as always. Most species would have frozen in terror at the sight of the valley, the predators, the dangers, but not Kane. Not his honey badger. That night, the jungle was alive with sounds of predators moving, hunting, claiming their territory. Kane set up a small camp, careful and precise. The honey badger scurried around, sniffing the air and digging into small burrows, always on alert. Kane watched, smiling slightly. He understood the rules of this world in ways the aliens could not. Strength alone did not matter here. Intelligence, courage, and an unexpected ally, like the honey badger, were far more important. The council on the observation platform could not hide their shock. A human had set foot on the deadliest world in their galaxy, accompanied only by a honey badger, and had not only survived the first day but had already begun to earn the attention of the apex predators. Kane leaned back against a tree, looking at the stars above, calm and confident. The council began to realize that humans were something entirely different, something unpredictable. Even as the predators watched from the shadows, Kane's presence alone changed the rules. He was not afraid, and his honey badger was no ordinary pet. Together, they were about to rewrite what every species in the galaxy thought they knew about humans. The death world had welcomed them, but it would soon learn a hard lesson. Some humans were not meant to be feared, they were meant to be respected. Kane moved carefully through the dense jungle, his eyes scanning every shadow, every movement. The sounds of the death world were constant, snarls, growls, and the cracking of branches under heavy footsteps. He knew the apex predator of this planet was close. It had killed every other creature it faced, leaving no challengers behind. Yet Kane walked calmly, his honey badger following closely, its sharp eyes watching every detail. A sudden rustle ahead made Kane stop. The honey badger crouched low, tail twitching. Kane whispered a soft command, and the creature obeyed instantly. From the shadows, the apex predator emerged. It was massive, taller than a human, with thick scales and claws that could tear through stone. Its eyes glowed with a predatory intelligence. It roared, a sound that shook the leaves and made distant creatures scatter. The alien observers on their platforms held their breath. They had never seen anything like this in action before. The predator stepped closer, muscles rippling, each movement calculated and deadly. Most beings would have frozen, terrified of even breathing. Kane, however, stood his ground. He did not make sudden movements. His honey badger hissed, exposing sharp little teeth, and lunged at the predator's front leg. The predator yelped in surprise, not used to such audacity from a smaller creature. Kane moved slightly, guiding the honey badger with quiet, confident commands. The predator snarled and swiped at the badger with its massive paw. The badger dodged nimbly, biting the predator's thick leg armor. Kane stayed calm, watching its movements and waiting for the right moment. He understood the predator's patterns, its strength, its speed, and its arrogance. Most creatures relied on raw power alone. Kane relied on strategy and coordination with his honey badger. The badger circled the predator, darting in and out, confusing it. Kane took a slow step forward, drawing the predator's attention. It lunged at him, roaring, but Kane sidestepped smoothly, keeping just out of reach. The predator was enormous, but Kane was faster than it expected. The honey badger struck again, nipping at its legs, and the predator stumbled, unbalanced for a brief moment. Kane seized the chance to move closer, whispering softly to his pet. The badger responded instantly, attacking the predator's sensitive joints, driving it back slowly. The alien observers were stunned. They had seen many species fail on this planet, but never like this. A human and a tiny creature were not only surviving, they were controlling the apex predator. Kane's calm, confident presence seemed to give the badger strength and courage. Together they moved as a unit, small and clever against raw power. The predator roared in frustration, realizing that brute strength alone could not win this fight. It tried to corner Kane against a large boulder, claws slashing, teeth snapping. Kane remained calm, guiding the honey badger to strike at the predator's legs again, forcing it to shift and stumble. Step by step, they were pushing the predator back from the center of the clearing. Kane's movements were careful, deliberate, never hurried. The honey badger acted on instinct and trust, striking where Kane indicated. Suddenly, the predator paused, sensing something it had never faced before. A small, fearless creature working with a human, it was unpredictable. Kane noticed the hesitation. He took a deep breath and spoke softly to the honey badger. It nodded in understanding, and together they made a bold move. The honey badger darted under the predator's legs, biting and scratching, while Kane feigned a sudden retreat, leading the predator into a narrow part of the forest. The predator, frustrated and confused, misjudged its steps and collided with a massive tree. The impact stunned it, giving Kane and the honey badger the upper hand. Kane stepped closer, keeping his eyes on the predator. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Enough," he said. The predator blinked, confused by the human's fearlessness. It had never been commanded, never been met with courage so pure. The honey badger stood by Kane's side, growling low, ready to defend him if needed. The apex predator, for the first time, hesitated and slowly stepped back, lowering its massive head. The alien observers gasped. They could not believe what they were seeing. The apex predator, a creature that had killed everything in its path, was retreating from a human and a honey badger. Kane smiled slightly, watching the predator vanish into the shadows. He knelt and patted the badger's head, whispering praise. The honey badger chattered happily, its tiny claws digging into Kane's hand. Kane knew this was just the beginning. The apex predator had tested him and he had passed. But the jungle held many more dangers, many more creatures that could crush him with a single swipe. Still he felt no fear. With his honey badger by his side he could face anything. He rose, scanning the dense forest, ready for whatever came next. The death world was dangerous, yes, but Kane and his honey badger had already begun to rewrite the rules. The predators might have ruled the planet, but they had never faced humans like Kane. Calm, fearless, and clever. With strategy, courage, and a loyal companion, even the apex could learn caution. Kane's presence was a statement. Humans did not flee, they did not tremble, and sometimes even the strongest beasts would bow to intelligence and bravery. The observation platform hovered silently above the death world, its glass walls reflecting the alien faces inside. The Galactic Council had gathered, watching the live feeds from the jungle below. Scientists and diplomats whispered among themselves, shocked and uneasy. No species had ever survived on this planet for more than a day. Most were dead within hours. Yet the feed showed Kane calmly walking through the deadly jungle, his honey badger at his side, fearless and in control. One council member, tall and thin with scales glinting silver, leaned forward. "It cannot be real," they said, voice trembling. "A human, surviving here? With only a small creature for aid." Other members shook their heads, unable to hide their disbelief. The video showed the apex predator from earlier, the massive, terrifying beast, retreating from Kane and his honey badger. The council had calculated that nothing smaller than a megabeast could influence the apex here, yet it had happened. Another member, shorter and covered in thick fur, muttered, "It is not just courage. That, coordination, intelligence, it is beyond anything we have seen from a human." The words hung in the air, heavy with fear and awe. Kane did not speak to the camera, did not make flashy moves. He simply observed, calculated, and acted. And the predators, even the deadliest ones, noticed and adapted, or retreated. From their seats, the council watched Kane cross a river filled with jagged rocks and sharp-toothed fish. The honey badger darted ahead, scouting the path, showing no hesitation. Kane followed with careful steps, never slipping, never panicking. A massive insect lunged from the water, claws snapping, but Kane sidestepped, guiding the honey badger to attack its weak spots. The alien observers whispered in alarm. Humans were supposed to be fragile. Yet here was Kane, calmly surviving hazards that had killed warriors and explorers from many species. "Do you see that?" one member hissed. "He moves like the predators, but he is human. He adapts to their instincts and uses them against them. It is terrifying." Others nodded, unable to argue. Kane's actions were proving that humans were unpredictable. They did not follow the expected patterns. They could think, adapt, and act with creativity that no other species possessed. A younger council member, still inexperienced, asked nervously, "But how can a single human control even a honey badger here? It is too small, too weak." An older, wiser member shook their head slowly. "It is not size that matters. It is fearlessness, intelligence, and trust between beings. Kane shows it all. The predators hesitate because they cannot predict him. They have never faced a mind like a human mind paired with an unpredictable companion." The feed showed the earlier apex predator moving cautiously through the shadows. Kane and his honey badger were nowhere near it, yet the predator avoided the area entirely. The council members leaned closer, some gripping their chairs. "He does not hunt the predator," one whispered. "He moves without threat, yet he commands respect. That is something no species here has ever done." The room fell silent, the reality sinking in. Humans were not just strong or lucky, they were different. Kane crouched near a cliff edge, observing a valley below filled with the remains of other predators and hunting grounds. The honey badger sniffed the air, tail twitching, ready to act at a moment's notice. Kane whispered softly to it, guiding it with calm authority. The predator had retreated hours ago, but the council continued to watch, fascinated. Every step Kane took was careful, every action deliberate. He had turned fear into strategy, chaos into control. Some council members felt a twinge of fear. If one human could do this, what might an entire human population be capable of? They had underestimated humans for centuries, calculating them as fragile and predictable. Kane was rewriting those assumptions in real time. Another member, with translucent skin revealing pulsing veins beneath, muttered, "We have been blind. They are not like the other species. They are dangerous. Not in a violent way, but dangerous in thought, strategy, and willpower." As night fell on the death world, the jungle glowed faintly with bioluminescent plants. Kane made a small camp, carefully lighting a fire and setting protective barriers with sticks and rocks. The honey badger patrolled the perimeter, alert but calm. The council continued to watch in stunned silence. They had predicted chaos, destruction, and human failure. Instead, they witnessed control, calm, and cunning. Kane and his honey badger had turned a planet of death into a stage for their skill. One council member finally spoke aloud, voice barely above a whisper. "If this is one human, imagine what a group could do." Imagine what their species is capable of across the galaxy. Others nodded, their unease growing. Kane was not only surviving, he was teaching the predators, the jungle, and the council itself a lesson about humans. The observation platform hummed quietly as the council members watched Kane settle for the night, his honey badger curled at his feet. The predators lurked in the shadows, unsure, cautious, and respectful. Even the deadliest beings on the planet were learning that humans were different. Unpredictable. Fearless. Intelligent. Kane had survived the first full day, and in doing so, had shifted the council's perception forever. Humans were no longer just another species. They were a variable no one could ignore. Kane woke with the first light of the alien sun, the jungle alive with the sounds of movement. Somewhere nearby, massive predators stirred, hunting smaller creatures or defending their territory. The honey badger was already awake, sniffing the air and darting around, checking the perimeter. Kane stretched, his eyes scanning the trees, the rocks, the shadows. Every step today would matter. The death world was dangerous, and he knew that survival was not just about strength, it was about advantage, about thinking ahead. They moved quietly through the dense jungle. Kane used his senses, listening to the slightest rustle or crack of a branch. The honey badger darted ahead, investigating, its tiny size letting it move where Kane could not. Together they made a silent team, moving like one organism with shared instinct. They passed a river where huge, spiked fish lurked, waiting for the unwary. Kane guided the honey badger to create a small distraction. It leaped and bit at the water's edge, drawing attention while Kane crossed safely. The predators below eyed him, cautious, sensing the human's calm intelligence. As they climbed a rocky incline, the ground trembled. Kane froze. The apex predator from before was nearby. This time it was not alone. Smaller predators, drawn by the presence of the apex, stalked in the shadows. Most would panic, but Kane didn't. He studied the terrain carefully. He whispered to the honey badger, pointing to a narrow path between jagged cliffs. The badger understood instantly, moving with precision. Kane followed, using every rock and tree as a tool. He did not fight the predators head-on. He used the landscape, the instincts of his pet, and clever timing to gain the advantage. The apex predator lunged, but Kane had already anticipated it. He ducked to the side while the honey badger darted forward, attacking sensitive spots on the predator's legs. The beast stumbled, confused by the coordinated assault. Kane moved closer, softly guiding the badger to attack again. The predator had strength, but Kane had intelligence, patience, and control. Step by step, he forced the apex to retreat without ever facing a direct battle it could win. The smaller predators watched cautiously. Kane had proven to them that raw power was not enough here. The honey badger's speed and Kane's strategy made them hesitant. Kane knew he could not rely on luck. He used small traps, fallen branches, uneven rocks, and vines, to create obstacles for the predators. Each time a predator lunged, it found itself slowed or blocked. Kane moved carefully, never reckless, while the honey badger struck with precision. Hours passed. Kane and his honey badger reached a plateau overlooking a valley filled with predator nests and hunting grounds. Kane knelt, studying the area. He whispered to his pet, pointing to weak spots in the predator's territory, and the badger moved silently, scouting and marking danger zones. Kane understood the jungle's rules now. Every predator, every river, every cliff had a purpose. He adapted to the world, bending it to his advantage while the predators watched, wary and uncertain. In one clearing, a massive predator lunged from the shadows. Kane and the honey badger had anticipated it. Using vines as a makeshift net, Kane trapped the creature's legs temporarily. The apex roared, thrashing wildly, but the honey badger was fearless, darting in to attack weak spots. Kane stayed calm, guiding the actions, ensuring nothing reckless happened. Step by step, the predator was forced back. Kane's cleverness, patience, and the bond with his pet made him stronger than brute force alone. The alien observers on the council platform watched with awe. They had expected chaos and failure, but instead, Kane moved like a master strategist. Even the apex predators, feared across the galaxy, were learning caution. Kane had no weapons except his intelligence and the honey badger, yet he controlled the battlefield. Every step was calculated. Every action had purpose. Fearless, small, and clever, Kane turned the jungle into his advantage. As night fell, Kane set up camp in a high clearing. The honey badger patrolled the perimeter, alert for intruders. Kane studied the valley below, noting the movements of predators and planning the next steps. The jungle had tested him and he had adapted. He had learned the strengths and weaknesses of the apex predators and used them against the very creatures that should have killed him. The predators were learning too. They began to recognize Cain as a force unlike any other, unpredictable, fearless, and cunning. They hesitated to attack even in their own territory. Cain smiled faintly, resting for the night. The honey badger curled beside him, satisfied and alert. Together, they had turned what should have been impossible survival into clear advantage. The council continued to watch, whispering in disbelief. Cain's actions were proof that humans were not ordinary. They were unpredictable, intelligent, and adaptable. Strength alone did not define survival, strategy, patience, and courage did. Cain had mastered the jungle in a way no other being had. The death world, for all its danger and chaos, had become a stage where the human advantage was clear. Cain drifted to sleep under the alien stars, confident and calm. He knew more challenges awaited. But the predators and even the council had learned an important truth. Humans did not rely on fear, they did not flee, and even the strongest beasts could be outsmarted. The honey badger stirred beside him, ready for whatever came next. Cain had turned survival into power, proving that intelligence and courage could make even a human a master of the deadliest world. The sun rose slowly over the jagged mountains of the death world, casting long shadows across the valley. Cain stretched and watched the predators stir in the distance. He had spent days moving through the jungle, learning the land, studying the creatures, and surviving what no one thought possible. The honey badger was already awake, sniffing the air and patrolling the perimeter. Together they had earned something no other being had: respect from the apex predators themselves. Cain moved carefully toward the center of the valley. The ground was littered with bones, remnants of battles long past. Massive predators, some taller than a human, watched him from the shadows. Their eyes glowed with caution, curiosity, and something Cain had noticed over the past days: recognition. They had learned that Cain was not a threat they could overpower with brute strength. He was clever, patient, and fearless. As Cain approached a clearing, the largest apex predator he had faced before emerged from the trees. Its scales shimmered under the alien sun, muscles coiled and ready. But Cain did not step back. The honey badger leapt from his shoulder and stood on the ground, tail flicking, eyes locked on the predator. Cain spoke softly, not as a threat, but as a calm presence in the chaos. The predator growled, but it did not attack. It had learned caution. The other predators watched from the edges of the clearing. Cain's movements were slow and deliberate. He knelt and gestured gently toward the apex, his eyes calm and steady. The honey badger stepped closer, fearless, sniffing the massive creature. Cain understood what the predators were sensing. He did not act out of fear, and he did not act recklessly. Every step, every gesture was measured and thoughtful. The apex predator lowered its massive head, examining Cain and his small companion. The honey badger hissed softly, but Cain placed a hand gently on its back, signaling patience. The predator blinked, as if realizing it had never encountered such beings before. Cain spoke quietly, words meaningless to the predators but filled with intent. The apex tilted its head, hesitant, then slowly backed away, letting Cain pass. It was the first sign that the deadliest creatures on the planet recognized him not as prey, but as something different. Cain moved through the valley, the honey badger at his side. Smaller predators scattered, leaving a path of cautious respect. The jungle, once a place of pure danger, had begun to bend to his presence. Cain had proven that strength alone did not command respect here. Intelligence, courage, and composure did. Even the apex predators understood that humans were unpredictable and not to be underestimated. From above, the Galactic Council watched in stunned silence. 4 days they had calculated failure, expecting the human to die quickly. Instead, they saw Cain walking calmly through the territory of monsters, unafraid, guiding his honey badger with quiet precision. They whispered among themselves, fear and awe mixing in their voices. "We underestimated them," one admitted. "Humans, they are unlike any species we have known." Another nodded. "Not just strong, clever, fearless, unpredictable." Cain paused near a massive cliff overlooking the entire valley. He knelt and patted the honey badger's head, whispering praise. The creature chattered softly, its sharp claws digging into Cain's hand in a gesture of trust. Cain looked out over the land he had navigated and survived. He understood the rules of this world now, the dangers, the predators, the challenges. And yet he felt no fear. The apex beasts had learned caution. The jungle had learned respect. And the council, watching silently, had learned a hard truth. Humans were not just another species to study or control. As night fell, Kane made a small camp in a high clearing. The honey badger curled up beside him, alert but calm. In the distance, the apex predator moved slowly through the shadows, keeping its distance but watching, a silent acknowledgement of Kane's skill and courage. Kane leaned back, staring at the alien stars above, thinking about the journey so far. He had come to this death world alone, with only a small companion, and had survived where countless others had failed. The predators had learned to respect humans. The jungle had learned that intelligence, courage, and strategy could outweigh brute force. And the Galactic Council, observing from afar, had learned to fear the human potential they had never understood. Kane smiled slightly. It was not fear he inspired, at least not entirely. It was awe. A new respect had been earned, not through weapons, not through sheer strength, but through the combination of human mind and heart, and the fearless loyalty of a small honey badger. Kane rose as the first light of a new day broke over the mountains. The honey badger followed him, tail flicking, eyes alert. They moved through the valley once more, not as prey, not as challengers, but as masters of their own path. The apex predators watched from the shadows, keeping their distance, but no longer with aggression. Kane had survived, adapted, and commanded respect where no one thought it possible. The council would record this human as a remarkable anomaly, a variable they could not calculate. Across the galaxy, whispers of the human and his honey badger would spread. A human had faced the deadliest world, walked among apex predators, and emerged not just alive but respected. Kane and his honey badger had rewritten what it meant to be human. Fearless, clever, unpredictable, they were proof that sometimes, even the strongest creatures must learn respect. Kane looked at the jungle one last time before moving forward. He knew this was only the beginning. Many challenges awaited, many worlds remained untamed. But on this death world he had left a mark. A mark of courage, intelligence, and an unshakable bond between a human and a small, fearless creature. The apex beasts had learned respect. And across the stars, the galaxy would soon learn that humans were not just another species, they were something extraordinary.